playing yourself 3 ridiculous reasons Black women stay in the academy. Number 1 is resilience, the idea that you don't want to let them get to you. Number 2 is resistance. You want to prove them wrong. Number 3 is responsibility. You feel responsible for all Black folks in the academy, or at least all Black women in the academy. And I'm going to add in a bonus 4th one here, and that's the rewards, or what I call the golden handcuffs. Hello, I am Dr. Catherine Sophia Bell, and I did all the things that Black women are told we're supposed to do. I got all the degrees, all the certifications, the marriage, the successful career, the kids. I had all of it, and I felt trapped by all of it. So I decided to liberate myself, and now I live life on my own terms, focusing on the things that I love, from reading, writing, speaking, and coaching, to embracing my sensuality and sexuality with myself, with lovers, and in Black kink spaces. So this channel is dedicated to the core pillars of transformation that I experienced in my own life, and I share those in an effort to motivate and encourage you in your own liberation journey while building beloved community along the way. So let's get into these 3 ridiculous reasons why Black women stay in the academy, with a bonus 4th reason, right? So some context. I was in the academy for 20 years, and I recently resigned/retired from my academic position as a tenured associate professor at a Research One institution, where I had a high salary, where I had a high research budget, where I had funding for all kinds of initiatives, and where I did all kinds of administrative positions. I left, and I have 0 regrets about leaving. So what I want to talk about today are some of the ridiculous reasons why Black women stay in the academy, and just encourage you to reflect on and think about for yourself, are you engaging in any of these kind of mentalities, or am I naming any of the ridiculous reasons why you may be staying when you really do want to go? So again, I have 3 core reasons, and I've added in a 4th bonus reason. I'm going to encourage you to subscribe to the channel, to like, to comment, to share this video if it resonates with you, or if you know other people with whom it may resonate. So let's get into it. So the first one is resilience, right? And resilience mentality is this idea of we're not going to let them get to us. Don't let them get to you. Don't let them get under your skin. Don't let them define you, right? This is the resilience mentality. And one of the ridiculous reasons why Black women end up staying in the academy when they really want to leave, right? So you stick around and you stick it out to prove that you have not internalized a sense of racism, a sense of sexism, a sense of heterosexism, a sense of ableism, even though you know those things are operating within the institutional structure where you work, right? So what I want you to do here is just let me know in the comments if you are staying at a job just to prove your resilience to the systemic institutional oppression that is operating at the college or university where you work. We have all done it, so there's no judgment here, but I'd like you to let me know in the comments if you're sticking in a job or staying with a job to demonstrate your resilience, right? Another way that resilience comes up for us is when we tell ourselves that we're not going to define ourselves by their measurements, right? So you tell yourself, I'm not going to define myself by their metrics or their measurements. But at the same time, you're constantly meeting or exceeding whatever those metrics or whatever those measurements may be, right? So again, here, think about it. How many times have you been told that this is the bar and you end up exceeding the bar or going above and beyond the bar, right? So how much of that is you trying to demonstrate your resilience, trying to prove that you can meet certain kind of standards or expectations, even though you're saying you're not going to let them get to you, right? So let me know in the comments if you often meet and exceed expectations at your job, and do they still act like you're the weak link or below the bar even when you surpass those expectations, right? So a lot of times you might be in a research group where you're expected to produce a certain number of papers or articles or whatever the case may be, or you might be a co-author on an article and you're expected to contribute a particular section to that article, or you may be, in a department, in a lab, whatever the case may be. And they constantly act like you are somehow the weak link there, or you're somehow not up to par or meeting the task. And so you end up working harder and doing more. And they end up leveraging that work and showcasing your work, even though they try to tell you that you're actually the weak link, right? So think about a time when that may have happened to you. And again, share it in the comments with us so other people can see that they're not the only ones, because I know this happens to a lot of women, a lot of Black women, a lot of women of color within institutional spaces, right? So it's like they will act like you're the weakest link, or they will act like you are somehow below the bar, even though you're constantly minimally meeting, but oftentimes surpassing whatever that bar is, right? Another way that resilience may show up is you telling yourself that they are not getting to you, right? They're not getting to me. I'm not going to internalize this. I'm not going to let them get to me. And at the same time, you're constantly having to vent and complain and process all the wrongs that you're experiencing, right? And so on the one hand, you say they're not getting to you. On the other hand, they're taking up a whole lot of your time and your energy whenever you're in conversation. So it's like as soon as you go to campus, as soon as you're in a department meeting or some other kind of meeting, as soon as you read your email or you have some kind of interaction with students or with faculty or with staff, you have to constantly process and vent and release all of that, right? So let me know in the comments, how many times have you been on campus or in a meeting or read an email or had an interaction, and after that you had to get on the phone with your friend or with a family member or with your therapist or whatever the case may be, so that you could just vent and release all of that, and you end up spending a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort, and yet you're trying to show this resilience that they're not getting to you, right? Like if you're constantly having to vent and release after every interaction that you have in this space, then it's probably not a great space for you to be in, right? And I'm not saying don't vent and don't process and don't release it, because you don't want that stuff to manifest in your body in other kinds of ways. It is important to process it. It is important to articulate it, to express it, to get it out. But if you're constantly having to complain and vent and release about the space that you're in, there's something wrong with the space that you're in. There's not something wrong with you. And you don't have to prove your resilience by staying in the space in order to try to show that they are not getting to you, right? Another way that this shows up, and this relates to the venting part that I was just talking about, like if we don't vent and if we don't release that or sublimate that or alchemize that, a lot of times that will show up in our bodies, right? So think about how the stress and the tension shows up in your body, right? Like, do you find yourself getting really tense and uptight when you have to go to campus? I remember when I used to have to teach, the days that I taught, I often would get a migraine, right? Do you find yourself having migraines and having headaches? Do you find yourself experiencing insomnia? Are there other ways that being in certain spaces is adversely impacting your health, right? So again, let me know in the comments, how is your academic job, how is your professor job adversely contributing to your health issues or negatively impacting your health and wellness? And again, for me, this showed up in terms of, especially as, well, I already mentioned it showed up for me with migraines, sometimes around teaching time. But in that last year or two that I was in the academy, I was having lots of migraines. I was having a hard time sleeping, lots of insomnia. I gained a lot of weight. There was a lot of tension and tightness in my body. It was like everything in my body was telling me it is time to go. And ultimately I listened, right? So think about how is the stress of your work, of your job, showing up in your body and telling you that maybe it's time to go. Okay, so that's resilience. Number 2 is resistance, right? And the resistance mentality is that you are going to prove them wrong, right? But here's the thing with proving them wrong. My thesis, my hypothesis, my theory is that they already know that they're wrong. They already know that you're not the weak link. They already know that you actually have the goods. They're just trying to convince you that you don't have the goods so that they can exploit more from you, and so that they can make you feel like, oh, I feel so fortunate. I'm so lucky to be able to have this job, right? So again, I think that they actually don't believe that you're not good enough or that you don't have what it takes. Again, I think that they do believe that you have the goods, and they just want to continue to exploit those goods from you. So let me know again in the comments, do you really believe that they think you're not good enough? Or do you think they're trying to make you feel that way? Do you think they're just trying to make you feel that way? And at the end of the day, does it matter? Like, does it matter if they really think you're not good enough, or does it matter if they know you're good enough and they're just trying to convince you that you're not good enough, right? And a lot of times people use the language of imposter syndrome here, and I find that really problematic, because what I found when I was in the academy is like most of the imposters were the people who were masquerading as the know-it-alls, as the superstars, as the people who knew it all, right? And they actually did not know that much. And oftentimes the people who felt the quote-unquote imposter syndrome, or were made to feel like imposters, were the ones who were actually the brilliant ones, who were doing all the work, who were fabulous, who were amazing, right? So it's important to pay attention to that. But it's also important to pay attention to when you're constantly doing more and more and more in order to prove that you do belong there, that you are above the bar, and all of those kinds of things, right? And so, again, pay attention to when you are working harder and allowing them to extract more labor from you and more of your brilliance from you because you want to prove them wrong about you not being worthy of being there or you not being a valuable contributor to the intellectual community or whatever the case may be, right? So let me know again in the comments if you feel like you have to work twice as hard to get half as far, right? Like this is something that is often taught in the Black community under the guise of Black excellence, this idea that you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Have you internalized that message and have you actually done that in your academic job, in your professor position? Let me know if your research, your teaching, and your service often exceed expectations and is often above and beyond your colleagues, especially your white and male colleagues, right? How many times have you been told, like, okay, this is the bar that you need to meet, and again you're working twice as hard or you're trying your best to exceed that again to prove that you deserve to be there, right? So I can remember when I was going up for promotion and tenure, I was told that I needed to have a single authored book and 6 to 8 articles, peer-reviewed articles, right? And a lot of people told me that was actually a ridiculous expectation to have to do the book plus the articles, and or even if you had to do the book plus the articles, that many was a ridiculous ask. But of course I did the single authored book because I was told that's what I had to do. I also had an anthology, so I co-edited an edited collection in addition to my single author book, and I did the 6 to 8 articles. And where I got tenure, it was the second university where I worked, which was at Penn State University. My first tenure track position was actually at Vanderbilt University, where I had already produced several articles. So that book plus 6 to 8 articles was in addition to the articles that I'd already done when I came to Penn, that I'd already published when I came to Penn State, which somehow like did not count toward tenure when I got to the new institution, right? So all that to say, I've been there, right? Like I've definitely exceeded the expectations across the board from research to teaching to service. And I can look back and see how that labor was exploited, like in an effort to get me to prove whatever the case may be. And I wasn't in a place where people were explicitly telling me that I was not good enough or that I was the weak link or that I did not belong there. But there is something in the energy of most university spaces and college spaces that either directly or indirectly, implicitly or explicitly kind of feeds you that kind of messaging. So it's important to pay attention to that and pay attention to whether or not you're sticking something out and staying with something out of that space of resistance of wanting to prove them wrong and what the cost is to you to do that. Okay, the third one, and I think this one is a little bit harder, again, especially for Black women who feel such a sense of obligation to community, to the collective and all the things. But I'm going to get into it anyway. So this third one is responsibility, right? Like you feel a sense of responsibility to like all Black folk in the academy, or especially Black women in the academy. And you feel like you have to stay because if you leave, what's going to happen to the Black undergraduate students? What's going to happen to the Black graduate students? What's going to happen to your Black coworker professors, right? And so even though you know that that position is no longer aligned for you, even though that position is draining the life and draining the energy out of you, you stick with it and you stick it out because you have this sense of responsibility to everyone except for yourself, right? So you are sacrificing yourself, you are martyring yourself out of this sense of responsibility and obligation to other people, right? And part of the one way that I would want to reframe that for you, if that's the case for you, is that you can still be there for your community. You can still support Black people. You can still support Black women without having to be a professor or without having to be in the academy. Right. And so oftentimes you'll feel or assume that the only way that you can fulfill that sense of responsibility or obligation is to stay in it. But I want to invite you to think about ways that you may still be able to support Black women, support Black folks without having to do it in a space that is causing you harm. Right. And so, again, I can give myself as an example here. I became a professor in part, but I became a philosophy professor in particular. I decided to get my PhD in philosophy in particular because I found out as an undergraduate at Spelman College, where I was majoring in philosophy. I started out as a biology pre-med and pre-law major. I switched to philosophy with the expectation of doing medical school and law school when I finished. And I wanted to practice law dealing with medical research ethics, but I realized that I really didn't have a sustainable interest in, let alone a passion for the sciences. So I dropped medical school. And by like my junior or senior year, I was still thinking about law school or international studies or something like that. And at that time, this was the late 90s, I found out there were only 16 Black women in the country with a PhD in philosophy. So I felt a moral and personal obligation to increase our representation in the discipline, and I decided to go to graduate school. I earned a master's and PhD in philosophy, and then as a junior faculty member, I founded the Collegium of Black Women Philosophers with the specific intention and objectives of recruiting and retaining more Black women into the discipline of philosophy, right? So I felt a responsibility and a sense of, connection to that mission, right? So my first tenure track job was actually at Vanderbilt University. My tenure home was in African American and Diaspora Studies, and I had a courtesy appointment in the philosophy department. So one of the reasons that I left Vanderbilt University and went to Penn State University is that at Penn State University, I was hired in the philosophy department. And so I felt like within the philosophy department, I was better positioned to do the work of Collegium of Black Women Philosophers, which is something that I started when I was still at Vanderbilt and I took with me when I went to Penn State University. Right. And so one of the reasons I went to Penn State is because Penn State was committed to doing more of the work of recruiting and retaining Black women in the discipline of philosophy, right? So I say all that to say I literally became a philosopher to increase the representation of Black women in the discipline of philosophy. And I really enjoyed working with so many Black women graduate students as a philosophy professor. But again, when it was time for me to go, it was important for me to do what was right for me and what felt aligned for me and leave, right? And so I had to have conversations with graduate students. I was dissertation director for several students. I was on the dissertation committees of several students. And so I tried to give them enough time so that if they wanted to finish with me on their committee, they had to finish by the time that I was resigning/retiring, right, which was June 30th of 2023. And so some were able to finish in time before I left. Others were not and had to make other arrangements. But ultimately, I could not stay in it only because I wanted to continue to support Black women graduate students who were getting their PhDs in philosophy, right? And what's interesting about this is that at the time that I announced that I was going to leave, they were so supportive and encouraging of me choosing myself, doing what was right for me, doing what felt aligned for me, right? And so I had one student who said, I come from a legacy of Black women who know when and how to leave, and you are one of them, and I appreciate that, right? I had another Black woman graduate student say to me, so many people tell us to choose ourselves, but rarely does anybody show us how to choose ourselves, and so thank you for showing us what choosing, that's making me cry. Thank you for showing us what choosing yourself looks like. And so I just have gratitude for the opportunity to model for them not only what it looks like to become a Black woman philosopher and get a PhD in philosophy and be successful in the academy, because I did it very well for 20 years. But I was also able to model for them what it looked like to walk away on my own terms and do what was best for me and be able to build something that was successful outside of outside of that specific traditional institutional structure, right? And so I'm able to continue to work with Black folks, with Black women, with women of color, even though I'm not a professor anymore. I'm building my own academy, right? Like I have La Belle Vie Academy, so I'm still able to work with my target audience just from a different position, right? And so I say all of that to say you can continue to connect to that sense of responsibility, that sense of community, without having to stay in a position that is not aligned for you. Okay, I did not expect to get so emotional on that. Okay, so that's the responsibility one. Okay, and then the last one is a little bit lighter. That is the bonus one that I'm offering, and that's rewards, right? So this is what I call the golden handcuffs, those nice and shiny things, the titles that you may have that look really pretty and seems like a great opportunity, but the cuffs start to get tight after a while. They start to feel constraining after a while, right? So I want to invite you to notice if or when you're compromising yourself and what's best for yourself for a certain kind of titles, for a certain kind of status, or for shiny objects, right? And again, I'm not judging here. I received a lot of titles, a lot of status, a lot of shiny objects as a professor and administrator in the academy, right? So again, I had tenure, which is, quote unquote, job security or quote unquote, job for life. I had a high salary. I was not an underpaid or undercompensated professor by any means. I had robust research budgets. So I could hire research assistants. I could, travel, do whatever I wanted to do. So I had a very good, robust research budget. I had funds for various initiatives. I founded Collegium of Black Women Philosophers and a bunch of other initiatives throughout my time as an academic. I had funds to organize different conferences and symposia, bringing speakers and things like that. Again, I traveled the world going to conferences, speaking at conferences, attending conferences, doing research. I had a lot of course reductions, right? And so where I worked, the average or the standard kind of course assignment was a 2-2 load, where you teach 2 courses per semester. If you're at a teaching institution, you're probably teaching more. Like, actually, even at some research institutions now, they're doing like 2-3. Teaching institutions, I think, tend to be 4-4, or something like that, depending on the institution, right? But the standard load where I was a 2-2, but I rarely taught a full load of 2 courses each semester. So I often negotiated for course reductions, where I got fellowships or postdoctoral fellowships and things like that to reduce my teaching load. So I rarely actually taught a full teaching load during the years that I was a professor. And I also held various administrative positions. So again, I was the director of graduate studies at one point. I was a placement officer at one point. I was the interim head of a department on 2 different occasions. I did it interim for 1 year intentionally because I didn't want a full term of 3 years or 5 years. So I stepped in a pinch for a department on 2 different occasions. And I was the director of a research center. So I did all of those things, and I had all of those things, and I still walked away and I still left because it did not feel aligned for me, right? So I say that to say it's important to pay attention to those golden handcuffs when the titles and the status and the shiny objects get you to stay in something that actually does not feel aligned for you anymore, or you're not able to do the thing. It just doesn't feel aligned anymore, and it's time to go, but you're compromising because the rewards are a little bit too strong. And I'm not talking about like, okay, again, these are rewards. This is not just baseline salary or getting your needs met and things like that. But a lot of times we stick around for the rewards, not necessarily from a place of necessity, right? So again, let me know in the comments, what kind of rewards are you receiving for staying in the academy, even though you want to leave, and what makes it hard for you to walk away, or what makes it harder for you to walk away. So again, I decided to liberate myself and put my beauty and my brilliance into La Belle Vie Academy. Instead of building up somebody else's institution, I decided to build my own academy where I could work with my target audience and my target clientele, and that has been beautiful and amazing for me to be able to do that through my signature programs like High Achievers, like La Belle Vie Writers, which I'll be talking more about coming soon, because what's beautiful about La Belle Vie Writers is, again, I'm able to work with from graduate students to assistant to associate to full professors. I'm able to work with administrators. I'm able to work with independent scholars and really just see them all flourish with their writing projects, flourish with their identity as scholars and as writers, and get their articles done, get their qualifying exams done, their dissertations done, get their books published and all of that. And so I'll be talking more about La Belle Vie Writers and sharing some of the books that have been written by members of La Belle Vie Writers. And that's been really exciting to see on the other side of my decision to quit my academic job, right? And it's a way of me encouraging you. If you know that there's something that you want to do beyond the academy, know that your gifts will make room for you and there is space to do the thing that you want to do. So I basically assessed what I loved about my job as a professor and what I did not love or even hated about my job as a professor. And I realized the things that I loved I could do outside of being a professor. I didn't have to be a professor at a college or at a university to do the things that I love. And I can still stay connected to the academy as a speaker, right? So I still give keynote addresses. I still give lectures on campus. I'll still do like fireside chats and coaching and mentoring and those kinds of things. But I'm not constrained by the professor position anymore. So I was able to take all of the things that I love and keep those things and release the things that I don't love and let those things go, right? So I do want to, again, encourage you to subscribe to this channel, to like this video, to give me some comments, to share this with anyone you think it would be a good fit for, so that I can continue to connect with my target audience. Let me know also in the comments what really landed for you or what really struck home for you in this conversation today. Share some examples again of when you've operated from this space of resilience or resistance or responsibility, or the rewards that you're receiving at your institution, and how are you navigating that, right? So thanks for joining me for this discussion. At this point, I'm sure that you are either thinking about leaving the academy, or you want to leave the academy and you're trying to figure out how to do that. So of course, I offer an exit strategies course suite. I offer coaching for that purpose. And so you're welcome to join my community, or connect with me for coaching if you're looking for the pragmatic planning and the proverbial permission slip to walk away from your professor position. So definitely reach out to me, and I'm happy to work with you in that capacity. My next video is going to be Love It and Leave It, what I loved about the academy and I still left, right? So again, I really want to, a lot of times we focus on like what's toxic or what's problematic about an institution. And I think it's important to pay attention to that. But sometimes you want to walk away from something just because you're ready to go, because it no longer feels aligned, right? Like you can love something and still want to leave it, right? And so as I said before, there were things I loved about it and I still walked away from it, and I was able to maintain the things that I love without having to stay locked into the professor position, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my next video. And then after that, I'm going to shift focus a little bit from the exit strategies more to La Belle Vie writers, because I think it's important to talk about exiting, but I also think it's important to talk about like what you can do outside of that space, right? And so I want to talk about the things that I've been doing after exiting. And right now, a lot of my energy and efforts and joy have been coming with my work with La Belle Vie writers. So I'll be talking more about that in the coming weeks. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. And I'll see you next time with the next video, which is Love It and Leave It, what I love about the academy and why I still left. All right, good talking to you. Bye.